Hey, thanks for being here. Let's do some pod crashing. Episode number 201 is Svetlana Svetlana. Your host, Dan Kitrosser. Dude, you got to tell me about this podcast and how it came into being, because, I mean, this to me is what modern day journalism is all about.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much. This podcast came about because I stumbled upon the illustrious life of Joseph Stalin's daughter, Svetlana Aliyeva. And I just never had even heard of her, and suddenly found that she lived maybe the most incredible life that I had ever come across.
You actually got to meet her? Because, I mean, to us, I mean, she's always been that character that we read in headlines or in magazines.
I did not get to meet her, so I'm sorry. Yeah, no, she died before. She died before I found out about her story. But in some ways, just as a woman named Rosemary Sullivan, who wrote a great biography of her called Stalin's Daughter, said that she would never have written the book if she had met Svetlana. And I kind of feel the same way. You know, it's like my love of trying to understand this person comes from trying to couple together all of the different wild chapters of her life from beyond the grave. So it's been a really incredible process.
You know what's really interesting about what you just shared with us is the fact that I've always believed that people who write stories or put things down in notes and things, they're speaking to a future generation. And so for you to be moved by this and to create the podcast is absolutely 100%, when it comes to words are not for necessarily our now, they're for everybody in the future.
Yeah, well, Margaret Atwood said, in the end, we'll all become stories, and it's so true, and then diving into her letters and her journals and her unpublished manuscripts, she ends her last book saying that this book is for the granddaughters and the grandsons, that they'll be able to hear my story and make human characters from history. And, when you read something like that, it just, you feel like history is coming right out up from the page and smacking you across the face.
Yep. Wow. To be in those journals, though, Dan, I mean, it's like, because I know I'm a daily writer, so I have 29 years of daily writing. When I go back to 1994, the scent of that paper, the ink, the paint that I put in there. I mean, what did you, when you were in those journals, what was it like?
Well, the best part for me is seeing Svetlana was a voracious writer, and she was writing a lot in English, which was not her first language. So not only was she a writer, she was a rewriter. So what's great, if you've ever seen one of her letters or her journals or her manuscripts, is she, as you can see the Courier New font, and you can see the typewritten pages, and then you see the underlines, exclamation points, scribbles on the side of the page. I mean, it's just a mess. I mean, like, every page is just its own sort of Rorschach, test. And that's where it starts to feel alive, where you actually see the person who was the writer writing the words. And it's just incredible.
Wow. I got to tell you, I love the length of each episode, because you give me that right amount of space where I can, take it all in, think about it, create conversation. And so it's like I go to the next episode, but you give me enough space to where I don't get burned out by the episode.
Yeah, well, that is, I will take the compliment, but it's definitely shared between me and my whole team of Allison Joy, Adam Weber, Catherine Isaac, Joe Batsilowitz. So we have a whole group. We call ourselves the Svetlanites. It is true. I will take the credit that I got obsessed first, but I definitely did not fall the hardest. And so, we've spent hours just, outlining, trying to craft, what are the episodes of her life, which is also, is like crafting story out of life is its own editorial choice. So, we hope that we're as honest as we can be about our perspective and what I'm bringing to the table, what we're bringing to the table. A lot of people in comments on the social media, some people love that I bring my own life story into it. Some people don't. But I also think that that's the only way that I can be honest about this is someone's real life. Yeah. And I never met them, and I am not objective. I am a storyteller myself. So there's a lot of craft that goes into it, and I try and lift behind the curtain.
I think this is coming at such a perfect time because Russia is definitely back in the news again. And I bump into people all the time that talk about the former leaders. Stalin is definitely one of them. So to have this about Stalin's daughter, I mean, I can't imagine the culture shock to go from Russia to the United States. And the reason why I bring that up is because I see a lot of Ukrainians that are coming to the United States now that don't understand how Americans live. But they're getting, I mean, like the other day, someone from Ukraine discovered the lottery system. You should have seen their eyes. They won $5.
I mean, well, that is sort of how, Svetlana felt. So, when she comes over in 1968, she had grown up in capitalism. She was the princess of the Kremlin, but she, wore gray and beige and lived in an apartment, and got whatever her allotment was. So when she arrives in America, she has a $1.5 million book deal, which is like $15 million today. And she has no concept of money. Now, that can go one of two ways. But you can, get a taste of capitalism and you're like, oh my God, I'm going to ride this all the way to the top. But for Svetlana, she was like, money? What is money? So she, she gives a couple $100,000 to start a hospital in India here. She pays off her new husband's debts there. Yeah. And, it's why some people will say that her life has this tragic end is that she ends penniless and in obscurity. But she never cared about money. She didn't understand it. She didn't enjoy it. She didn't want to be to live a ritzy life. And so in some ways, she also got what she wanted, which was to be out of the limelight and to have her own life. So it's complicated. And definitely her story of someone who's never fully capitalist, never fully communist, it's complicated. And there's a lot of resonance today.
Yeah, I'll tell you a fascinating part of your podcast, and I really kind of chuckled like a child when I came across it, was that she got married 3 weeks after landing on American soil. I laughed at it because 3 weeks after I got divorced, I got married again, but I've been married for 30 years. So I mean, I'm sitting there going, "Oh my God!"
When you know.
You do know. So I'm anxious to find out because you dug in deep with her journals and stuff. What was that choice? I mean, 3 weeks and then she's married?
Yeah. So, it actually was, it was about a year that she lived in America on her own. So she had a little bit of that buffer. But where the 3 weeks comes in is she was a big celebrity in America. She was the Soviet princess who defected. And she got letters and telegrams and phone calls from people all over the country. One such person was a very strange, very mystical woman named Olga Lazarevich Hindenburg Lloyd Wright.
Wow.
She was the widow of famed architect Frank Lloyd Wright.
Yep.
And she was still running his architect cult. I shouldn't say cult. It was not a cult. It was a commune out in Arizona. And Olga believed that Svetlana should come to her because Olga had a daughter herself, a daughter named Svetlana, who had died tragically in a car crash a couple decades earlier. And she believed that our Svetlana, Joseph Stalin's daughter Svetlana, was the reincarnation of her dead daughter Svetlana. So she brings her to the desert, to Scottsdale, to a world fashioned out of Frank Lloyd Wright architects. And it's there that she introduces her to Frank Lloyd Wright's number two, a man by the name of William Wesley Peters. And 3 weeks after she sets foot in Taliesin, she only planned to stay for a week, but 3 weeks later, she marries William Wesley Peters, who in fact was the widower husband of the dead Svetlana. So Svetlana is now becoming Svetlana Peters, who is, so she is called Svet 2 in the Taliesin world. And, so that whole story of running away from one sort of oppressive universe, and what Svetlana finds out when she's there is that she's really been lured there, maybe under false pretenses. She was certainly looking for a mother figure, and looking for family, and really they end up just draining her bank account, which is what happens. But she does fall in love with William Wesley Peters, even though they do divorce, spoiler alert. But for her, she has left her family. She's left her home. She is tasting American independence for the first time in her life. But it's also very chaotic. There's no single center. And when she finds herself inside of this magical world where people are wearing tuxedos in the desert and making art nonstop, it's intoxicating. So, she globbed onto a tall hunk. What can I say?
I would do the same thing if I were in another country and I came to America. I mean, I think that's such a new frontier for so many people in this country. But I want to go back to the reincarnation, because coming from Russia, reincarnation to me is Buddhism. I mean, was she into that by any chance? That spiritual form?
So Svetlana was spiritual. She went through a lot of different churches. She says actually that the person who first introduced her to the story of Jesus was a man by the name of Joseph Stalin, who thought he was a great guy. Even though Stalin all but obliterated religion, he also had a spiritual side. But Svetlana definitely, and she writes about it in her books, that that she was born with this spiritual center. Now, whether or not she believed in reincarnation, that's not really Svetlana's bag, but it is Olga Vanna's. So Olga Vanna, Lazovich Hindenburg Lloyd Wright, was born in Montenegro, and she in the turn of the century, and she always wanted, there was great tumult in that area of the world. We're talking the end of the Tsars, Russian Revolution. Yep. You're an aristocrat one day, you're being, beheaded another day. So she was always yearning for the power of immortality, for that higher plane to live forever. And she found her leader by the name of Georgy Gurdjieff, who was an Armenian mystic who believed that through the power of dance and through pain, real physical pain, you could elevate yourself. Gurdjieff is a major mystical thinker that many people study in their own right and through all the things that he had studied. But basically, it's through Gurdjieff that Olga Vanna starts to get in touch with her inner mystic. Yeah. And so when she then moves to America and falls in love with this architect, Frank Lloyd Wright, it's like you have this famous architect on one side and you have this mystic on another, and they're going to change the world. So she outlives Frank Lloyd Wright and then uses his fellowship, the world he called Taliesin, uses that fellowship and that community to bring her version of Gurdjieffian mysticism into practice. So now she tells everybody, she leads everybody. They have to make confession to her. They have to dance. You must dance. Yeah. She tells them who they are allowed to sleep with, who they're allowed to marry. Wow. She even to limit the amount of children. She even forces men to have sex with each other, which for me would be fantastic. But she really is quite controlling and demanding in all sorts, in every aspect of people's lives in the Taliesin world. And so that's the universe that our Svetlana unknowingly walks herself into. Olga Vanna was always seeking somebody to claim the spot of her deceased daughter, Svetlana, and she hoped that with this new Svetlana, not only would she have her daughter back, but also Svetlana would come with some money because of her book, and also notoriety, because the only way that the Frank Lloyd Wright architects could get customers was by having lavish parties in the desert. And, wouldn't you go to a party in the desert if you learned that a dictator's daughter was hanging out there?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So now this is one creative person to another here. If you could, would you go to Russia to record an episode?
Oh, I definitely would.
Yeah.
Would. I mean, I spoke to a reporter who was interested, who was a Russian who had just fled in the last year. So he's now working out of Latvia, and he's going to move off to Amsterdam. And, he was just being able to to be in touch with Russians right now,
Yeah.
and also Ukrainians as well, like, is really such a privilege because, I'm looking at this from the very comfortable, cushy lens of being an American in the 21st century. My grandparent, I had a grandparent who was an immigrant, but otherwise like American, 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 and that comfort and that real idea of freedom, like we throw the word freedom around a lot, but I don't think as Americans we really understand what it means to not be able to speak your voice. Like somebody saying like, ooh, that joke hurts on Instagram, that is not oppression. Like that is not. Like oppression is being locked up for the rest of your life. Navalny is in solitary confinement. Like that is oppression. And so, being in touch with what really is at stake in our world and seeing like real artists and thinkers who are as tormented as Svetlana was, 50, 60 years ago, that would be incredible. And I through the power of internet and social media, I do feel lucky that I can be in touch with them. But I would love to, walk the walk that Svetlana did, and
wow.
And there are people who are still alive. So I've been who are her friends. So I've been lucky over Zoom to meet people who knew her, and I feel like going to Russia even more so.
Absolutely. You got to come back to this show anytime in the future. The door is always going to be open for you, dude. I love your storytelling, and I know there's more than just this inside that creative mind.
Oh, well, it has been such a pleasure, Arrow. The time flew by so fast.
It did. Well, you be brilliant today, okay?
You too. All right. See ya.